The United States government has done some truly incredible things. Landed on the moon, built the internet, and also lied to its own citizens so many times it could qualify for an Olympic medal in creative fiction. We are talking about fake attacks, secret experiments on civilians. Wars started over events that never happened, and cover-ups so absurd they sound like rejected movie scripts. From presidents looking straight into cameras and lying through their teeth, to entire agencies dedicated to manipulating what you think. These are 33 of the biggest, most brazen, and sometimes downright stupid lies the US government has ever told. Some of these will make you laugh. Some will make you angry. And a few might just make you question everything. 1. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest military brass in America, sat down and drafted something called Operation Northwoods. The plan was simple: stage terrorist attacks on American soil, blow up buildings, sink boats full of refugees, maybe shoot down a civilian airliner, and then blame it all on Cuba. The goal was to manufacture public outrage so the US could justify invading Fidel Castro's island. We are talking about the Pentagon proposing to kill American citizens as a marketing strategy for war. The document was fully signed off by the Joint Chiefs and landed on President Kennedy's desk. Kennedy, to his credit, looked at this insanity and said absolutely not. He rejected it, and the plan was buried in classified archives for decades. It only came to light in 1997 when the Assassination Records Review Board declassified it. So yes, your own military once pitched domestic terrorism as foreign policy. 2. Thomas Jefferson spent his entire political career screaming about strict construction of the Constitution. If a power was not explicitly written down, the federal government simply did not have it. Period. No exceptions. Then Napoleon Bonaparte, desperate for cash to fund his European wars, offered to sell the entire Louisiana territory for about $15 million. Suddenly, Jefferson's constitutional principles developed a serious case of amnesia. The Constitution says absolutely nothing about the president buying foreign land. Jefferson knew this. He privately admitted he was overstepping his authority. But the deal was too good. He told Congress this was simply a treaty power, which was technically allowed. It was not. It was a real estate transaction the size of Western Europe. Jefferson doubled the nation and violated his own philosophy in one signature. Principles are apparently negotiable when you can buy half a continent for 3 cents an acre. 3. On July 9, 1962, the United States detonated a 1.4 megaton nuclear bomb about 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean. They called it Starfish Prime. The official line was that this was a routine test to study high-altitude nuclear effects. What they did not mention was that nobody really knew what would happen. Turns out, setting off a nuclear explosion in space creates an electromagnetic pulse that fries electronics across a massive radius. The blast knocked out streetlights in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. It destroyed at least 6 satellites, including Telstar, America's shiny new communications satellite. The radiation created an artificial belt around Earth that lingered for years. Scientists had warned about potential damage to the ozone layer and satellite systems. The government shrugged and pushed the button anyway. When the consequences hit, officials acted surprised. Oops. Apparently, nuking space has side effects. Who could have possibly predicted that? 4. In October 1990, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl known only as Nayirah testified before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. With tears streaming down her face, she described Iraqi soldiers storming a hospital in Kuwait City, ripping premature babies from incubators, and leaving them to die on the cold floor. It was gut-wrenching. It was also completely fabricated. Nayirah was actually Nayirah al-Saba, daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. Her testimony was coached by Hill & Knowlton, a public relations firm hired by the Kuwaiti government for nearly $11 million. No such incubator massacre ever happened. Amnesty International initially repeated the claim but later retracted it. By then, the damage was done. Her testimony was cited by senators and President Bush as justification for the Gulf War. A PR firm literally scripted a fake atrocity, cast an ambassador's daughter as the victim, and America went to war partly based on professional acting. 5. For decades, the US government had a simple response whenever anyone asked about Area 51. What are you talking about? That place does not exist. Maps were edited. Airspace was restricted with shoot-down authorization. Workers were flown in on unmarked planes with windows blacked out. Meanwhile, the entire world knew exactly where it was. People camped out on nearby hills with binoculars. It became the most famous non-existent military base on Earth. The base first appeared in 1955 as a testing site for the U-2 spy plane, and later the SR-71 Blackbird and stealth aircraft. The government only officially acknowledged Area 51 existed in 2013, when a Freedom of Information request forced the CIA to release declassified documents. 58 years of denial for a facility you could literally see on Google Earth. The lie was never about hiding the base. It was about hiding what they were testing there, which remains mostly classified to this day. 6. In the 1960s, heart disease was skyrocketing in America, and scientists were trying to figure out why. Some research pointed at sugar. The sugar industry panicked. Internal documents revealed in 2016 show that the Sugar Research Foundation paid 3 Harvard scientists the equivalent of about $50,000 today to publish a review blaming dietary fat, not sugar, for heart disease. The researchers complied. Their work was published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine in 1967. No disclosure of funding was required back then. The government's dietary guidelines followed suit, telling Americans to cut fat and eat more carbohydrates. For the next 50 years, people avoided eggs and butter while consuming mountains of sugar labeled as low-fat healthy alternatives. Obesity and diabetes rates exploded. One of those paid Harvard scientists later became head of nutrition at the USDA. The fox was literally guarding the henhouse, and the henhouse was full of sugar. 7. After World War II ended, the United States launched a secret recruitment program called Operation Paperclip. The mission was to grab Nazi scientists before the Soviets could. We are talking about engineers who built the V-2 rockets that bombed London, chemists who developed nerve agents, and physicians who conducted human experiments. These were not innocent academics who happened to live in Germany. Many were active Nazi Party members. Some were suspected war criminals. The official policy was that no one with Nazi affiliations could be recruited. So the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency simply scrubbed their files. Records were falsified. Nazi memberships were erased. War crime investigations were conveniently lost. About 2,600 scientists and their families were quietly relocated to America. Wernher von Braun, who used concentration camp slave labor to build his rockets, became a national hero and father of the American space program. America did not just forgive Nazis, it gave them corner offices and security clearances. 8. On August 4, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson announced that North Vietnamese torpedo boats had launched an unprovoked attack on the USS Maddox and USS Turner Joy in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress immediately passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving Johnson authority to escalate military involvement in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. There was just one problem. The second attack never happened. The first incident on August 2nd was real but minor, and arguably provoked by covert U.S. operations. The August 4th attack was a phantom. Radar operators saw blips that turned out to be weather anomalies. Sonar operators heard their own ship's propeller. The sailors on the Turner Joy fired at nothing for hours. Internal NSA documents declassified in 2005 confirmed that officials knew within days that no second attack occurred. Johnson pushed the resolution through anyway. Over 58,000 Americans and millions of Vietnamese died in a war justified by shooting at ghosts. 9. Starting in the 1950s, the CIA launched Operation Mockingbird, a systematic campaign to influence domestic and foreign media. The agency recruited journalists, editors, and media executives at major outlets including The Washington Post, Time Magazine, Newsweek, CBS, and others. Some were paid directly. Others cooperated for access or patriotic reasons. The CIA funded student organizations, cultural magazines, and even entire publishing houses. Books were commissioned. News stories were planted. Foreign journalists were bribed to print American propaganda. At its peak, the program allegedly had influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies. When this came out during the Church Committee hearings in 1975, Americans learned their free press had been partially scripted by intelligence agencies for decades. The CIA claimed it ended the program. Journalists who participated mostly kept quiet. The lesson was clear. Just because something appears in a reputable newspaper does not mean someone in Langley did not help write it. 10. From 1967 to 1972, the U.S. military ran Operation Popeye over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The goal was weaponizing weather. Air Force planes flew over 2,600 cloud-seeding missions, spraying silver iodide to extend the monsoon season and turn roads into impassable mud. The idea was to disrupt enemy supply lines on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Officially, the United States was doing no such thing. When journalists or foreign governments asked about weather modification, Pentagon spokespeople denied everything. Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird told Congress the military had no operational weather modification programs in Southeast Asia. That was a lie. The program was only exposed in 1971 when columnist Jack Anderson published leaked documents. The revelation was so embarrassing that it led to the 1976 UN treaty banning environmental modification as a weapon of war. America literally got caught trying to control the rain and had to sign an international agreement promising to stop. 11. Pat Tillman was a genuine American hero story. An NFL safety for the Arizona Cardinals, he turned down a $3.6 million contract after September 11th to enlist in the Army Rangers. When he was killed in Afghanistan in April 2004, the military immediately released a dramatic narrative. Tillman died heroically charging uphill toward enemy fire to protect his fellow soldiers. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star. His memorial service was nationally televised. 5 weeks later, the Army quietly admitted the truth. Tillman was killed by friendly fire. His own platoon shot him by accident during a confused engagement. The soldiers on scene knew immediately. They burned his uniform and body armor. Officers were ordered not to tell the family. The Pentagon had fabricated the entire enemy firefight story for public relations purposes. They turned a tragic accident into recruitment propaganda, lied to a grieving family, and only admitted it when they could no longer hide the evidence. 12. From 1952 to 1969, the U.S. Air Force ran Project Blue Book, supposedly a scientific study of unidentified flying objects. The public message was consistent. UFOs were nonsense, mass hysteria, weather balloons, or Venus being mistaken by confused civilians. Air Force spokespeople routinely mocked witnesses and dismissed sightings as imagination. Behind closed doors, the story was different. Blue Book collected over 12,600 UFO reports. Approximately 700 remained officially unidentified even after investigation. Internal memos showed genuine concern about objects demonstrating flight characteristics beyond any known technology. The Robertson Panel in 1953 recommended that the Air Force actively debunk sightings to reduce public interest, specifically to prevent overwhelming intelligence channels with UFO reports during a potential Soviet attack. So the official position was not, "We investigated and found nothing." It was, "We are deliberately making people feel stupid for reporting things we cannot explain." The ridicule was policy. 13. In the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. Army conducted a series of experiments on American cities to test biological weapons dispersal. In St. Louis, military planes and ground vehicles sprayed zinc-cadmium sulfide particles over low-income neighborhoods, specifically targeting public housing projects like Pruitt-Igoe, Residents were told the government was testing a smokescreen that could protect cities from Soviet bomber attacks. That was a lie. The army was studying how biological agents would spread through urban populations. Zinc cadmium sulfide was chosen because it was easy to track, not because it was safe. Cadmium is a known carcinogen. Decades later, researchers found elevated cancer rates in the sprayed areas. A 2012 sociology study revealed that the army specifically targeted poor black communities because they resembled Soviet cities in population density. The government used its own citizens as lab rats, chose them by income and race, and lied to their faces while doing it. 14. In March 2013, Senator Ron Wyden asked Director of National Intelligence James Clapper a direct question during a public Senate hearing. Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? Clapper paused, rubbed his head, and answered, "No, sir, not wittingly." 3 months later, Edward Snowden leaked classified documents proving the NSA was doing exactly that. The PRISM program collected data directly from tech giants. The metadata program hoovered up phone records of virtually every American. Clapper had lied to Congress under oath, which is a felony. When confronted, he called his answer the least untruthful statement he could give in a public setting. He was never prosecuted. Meanwhile, Snowden was charged under the Espionage Act and fled to Russia. The guy who exposed the lie became a fugitive. The guy who told the lie under oath kept his job for another 3 years and retired with full benefits. 15. In January 1893, American businessmen in Hawaii, mostly sugar planters who wanted to avoid import tariffs, decided Queen Liliuokalani had to go. They had a problem. Overthrowing a sovereign monarch looks bad. So U.S. Minister John Stevens fabricated a crisis. He claimed American lives and property were in danger, though no evidence of any threat existed. He then requested Marines from the USS Boston to come ashore. 162 armed troops surrounded the royal palace. The Queen, facing American military power, surrendered under protest to avoid bloodshed. Stevens immediately recognized the new provisional government led by the sugar planters. President Cleveland actually investigated, found the overthrow was completely illegal, and called it an act of war. He recommended restoring the Queen. Congress ignored him. Hawaii was annexed 5 years later. The United States stole a kingdom using fake danger, unauthorized military force, and a diplomat who lied to manufacture the whole crisis. 16. When Private First Class Jessica Lynch was rescued from an Iraqi hospital in 2003, the Pentagon released a blockbuster story. She had fought heroically, emptying her rifle at attacking Iraqis, sustaining multiple gunshot and stab wounds before being captured and mistreated. It was perfect. A blonde teenager from West Virginia battling like an action hero. The media went crazy. Except almost none of it was true. Lynch's rifle jammed without firing a shot. Her injuries came from a vehicle accident, not combat. She was knocked unconscious immediately. The Iraqi hospital staff treated her well, even tried to return her to Americans but were fired upon. The dramatic night vision rescue footage was staged. There were no Iraqi soldiers at the hospital. Doctors had the front door key ready. Lynch herself later testified to Congress that she was used to symbolize certain ideals and called the Pentagon story wrong. They turned an unconscious car accident victim into Rambo because they needed a hero for the evening news. 17. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military sprayed approximately 20 million gallons of herbicides over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The most notorious was Agent Orange, a defoliant designed to destroy jungle cover and enemy crops. American soldiers handled it constantly, mixed it, sprayed it from backpacks, washed in streams contaminated with it. Military officials assured them it was safe for humans. Just kills plants, they said. Internal documents from chemical manufacturers Dow and Monsanto show they knew since the 1960s that Agent Orange contained dioxin, one of the most toxic substances ever synthesized. It causes cancer, birth defects, neurological damage, and immune system destruction. The government knew. The manufacturers knew. The soldiers were never told. Hundreds of thousands of veterans developed cancers and other diseases. The VA denied claims for decades. Vietnamese civilians suffered even worse, with birth defects still appearing generations later. The official safety assurances were not mistakes. They were deliberate lies to keep the spraying going. 18. In 1948, Italy held its first democratic election since World War II, and the Communist Party was polling strong. The United States publicly proclaimed it would never interfere in European democracy. That was the official line. Behind the scenes, the CIA launched its first major covert political operation. The agency funneled millions of dollars to the Christian Democratic Party. It funded anti-communist propaganda, printed millions of pamphlets, and produced fake letters from Italian Americans warning relatives that voting communist would end family relationships. The CIA planted stories in newspapers, sponsored anti-communist films, and allegedly threatened to cut off Marshall Plan aid if communists won. The operation worked. The Christian Democrats won decisively. The template was set: publicly champion democracy while secretly manipulating elections. The CIA would repeat this playbook across Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia for decades. Italy, 1948, was the prototype. The lie was that America trusted voters. The truth was, America trusted voters only when they voted correctly. 19. In April 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, making it illegal for American citizens to own gold coins, gold bullion, or gold certificates. Citizens were required to sell their gold to the Federal Reserve at the fixed price of $20.67 per ounce. The penalty for non-compliance was up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Americans complied. Then, in January 1934, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act, which immediately revalued gold to $35 per ounce. The government had just bought gold from citizens at one price and instantly made it worth 70% more. This was not subtle. The government forced a sale under threat of imprisonment, then changed the price the moment it owned everything. Billions of dollars in value transferred from private citizens to the federal government overnight. Roosevelt called it economic stabilization. A more accurate term would be legal confiscation with a built-in profit margin. 20. From 1969 to 1973, President Richard Nixon repeatedly assured the American public and Congress that the United States respected Cambodia's neutrality. "We were only fighting in Vietnam," he said. Cambodia was off-limits. Meanwhile, the Air Force was conducting Operation Menu, a secret bombing campaign that dropped over 500,000 tons of explosives on Cambodian territory. That is more tonnage than the US dropped on Japan during all of World War II. The missions were classified. Pilots flew with falsified flight plans. Reports were destroyed or altered. Even Congress was not informed. When the New York Times reported on the secret bombing in 1969, Nixon and Kissinger responded by illegally wiretapping journalists and government officials to find the leak. The bombing destabilized Cambodia, killed tens of thousands of civilians, and helped create the conditions for the Khmer Rouge to take power. Nixon was not just lying about bombing a country. He was hiding a campaign that would lead to genocide. 21. In 1918, a new influenza strain emerged and began killing people at terrifying rates. This was the middle of World War I, and President Woodrow Wilson had just pushed through the Sedition Act, making it illegal to criticize the government or say anything that might hurt military morale. Public health officials understood that the flu was catastrophic. They said nothing. The federal government issued no warnings. Wilson never mentioned the pandemic publicly. Newspapers were pressured or legally threatened into silence. Cities that needed quarantines held Liberty Loan parades instead. Philadelphia packed 200,000 people together for a parade in September 1918. Within days, hospitals overflowed. The government suppressed truth to maintain war enthusiasm, and people died in their homes because they did not know the danger. Estimates suggest 675,000 Americans died from the flu, many because timely warnings never came. Wilson's wartime propaganda machine prioritized morale over survival. 22. In March 1959, the Dalai Lama fled Tibet during a failed uprising against Chinese rule. The official story portrayed this as a purely spiritual and spontaneous act of Tibetan resistance. The actual story involves the CIA. Starting in 1957, the agency recruited Tibetan fighters, flew them to Camp Hale in Colorado for guerrilla warfare training, and airdropped them back into Tibet with weapons and radios. The CIA funded resistance operations for years, providing millions of dollars and coordinating armed attacks on Chinese forces. The Dalai Lama's escape route was partly facilitated by CIA-trained operatives. The agency also provided him a personal stipend of over $180,000 annually throughout the 1960s. None of this was acknowledged until decades later. The U.S. publicly maintained it had no involvement in Tibet while secretly running paramilitary operations there. The spiritual leader's escape was as much a covert intelligence operation as it was a religious exodus. 23. On February 15, 1898, the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 206 American sailors. Within hours before any investigation, newspapers owned by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer declared Spain responsible. "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," became the national rallying cry. President McKinley, despite having no evidence of Spanish involvement, used the incident to push Congress toward declaring war. The Spanish-American War followed, and the United States acquired Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. But what actually sank the Maine? A 1976 investigation by Admiral Hyman Rickover concluded it was most likely an internal explosion, probably a fire in a coal bunker that ignited the adjacent ammunition magazine. The 1998 National Geographic study agreed. Spain almost certainly had nothing to do with it. The government either believed a lie or told one. Either way, America built an empire on a coal fire mistaken for an attack. 24. During the 1960 presidential campaign, John F. Kennedy hammered the Eisenhower administration for allowing a dangerous missile gap with the Soviet Union. He claimed the Soviets had hundreds of intercontinental ballistic missiles, while America lagged dangerously behind. The threat was existential. America was vulnerable. Voters were terrified. Kennedy won. Then he got access to the actual classified intelligence. There was indeed a missile gap. It just went the other way. The United States had a massive advantage over the Soviet Union in nuclear delivery systems. The Soviets had maybe 4 operational ICBMs at the time. Eisenhower had known this, but could not reveal how he knew without exposing U-2 spy plane intelligence. Kennedy learned the truth within weeks of taking office. The campaign that helped elect him was based on completely false information. He had either lied deliberately or repeated lies without verification. Either way, nuclear panic won an election. 25. In 1954, the U.S. detonated the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb at Bikini Atoll, and the explosion was more than twice as large as predicted. Radioactive fallout covered inhabited islands that were supposed to be outside the danger zone. Residents of Rongelap Atoll were exposed to severe radiation. They developed burns, hair loss, and radiation sickness. Here is where it becomes sinister. Instead of evacuating these people permanently, the government returned them to contaminated islands in 1957, assuring them it was safe. Internal documents reveal Project 4.1 was established specifically to study the effects of radiation on the human population. The Atomic Energy Commission tracked the islanders medically for decades, documenting thyroid tumors, cancers, birth defects, and miscarriages. The people were not patients, they were data points. A government memo literally referred to them as a control group for studying fallout effects on humans. America used Marshall Islanders as involuntary test subjects and lied about their safety. 26. On November 17, 1973, President Richard Nixon stood before 400 Associated Press editors and declared, "People have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I am not a crook." He was responding to questions about his personal finances, but the statement became emblematic of the entire Watergate scandal. Nixon was lying about everything. He had approved hush money payments to the burglars. He had ordered the CIA to obstruct the FBI investigation. He had personally directed the cover-up from the Oval Office. The White House taping system captured it all. When the Supreme Court forced Nixon to release the tapes, the recordings proved he had been lying for over 2 years. He resigned 9 months after declaring his innocence. The "not a crook" line became one of history's most famous self-incriminating denials. He said it on television, looking directly at America, knowing every word was false. 27. In April 1961, CIA-trained Cuban exiles launched the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. It failed spectacularly. But before the failure was obvious, the U.S. needed to maintain the fiction that this was a Cuban uprising, not an American operation. Ambassador Adlai Stevenson stood before the United Nations and displayed photographs of aircraft with Cuban Air Force markings, claiming these were planes flown by defecting Cuban pilots who had bombed their own air bases before joining the rebellion. It was entirely false. The planes were American B-26 bombers repainted with fake Cuban insignia at CIA facilities in Nicaragua. The pilots were CIA contractors, not Cuban defectors. Stevenson did not know he was lying. His own government had deliberately deceived him, sending him before the world with fabricated evidence. When Stevenson learned the truth, he was reportedly furious and humiliated. The Kennedy administration had used America's UN ambassador as an unwitting propaganda tool, destroying his credibility to maintain a doomed cover story. 28. When the United States took control of the Philippines from Spain in 1899, President William McKinley issued a proclamation of what he called benevolent assimilation. America came not as conquerors, but as friends, he said. The goal was to win the confidence, respect, and affection of Filipinos while uplifting and civilizing them. What followed was a brutal 3-year war that killed over 200,000 Filipino civilians. American troops burned villages, created concentration camps called reconcentration zones, and used water torture, which they called the water cure. Entire provinces were depopulated. Generals issued orders to kill everyone over the age of 10 in certain areas. Back in America, newspapers were fed stories of grateful natives welcoming their liberators. The reality was systematic destruction dressed in humanitarian language. McKinley claimed divine guidance for the mission. The divine guidance apparently included waterboarding and mass civilian deaths that never made the official reports. 29. On May 7, 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed the British ocean liner RMS Lusitania off the coast of Ireland, killing nearly 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. The U.S. government and British authorities insisted the ship was an innocent passenger vessel carrying no military cargo. Germany was portrayed as barbarically attacking civilians. The sinking shifted American public opinion toward entering World War I, but the Germans had specifically warned that Lusitania was carrying war materials. They published newspaper advertisements telling passengers not to board. For decades, both governments denied any military cargo. In 2008, divers finally confirmed what historians had suspected. The Lusitania was carrying approximately 4 million rounds of rifle ammunition and tons of other military supplies. Under international law of the time, this made the ship a legitimate military target. The innocent passenger liner narrative was a lie that helped drag America into a world war. 30. On December 4, 1969, 14 Chicago police officers raided the apartment of Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party. The official story was that Panthers opened fire and police returned it in a chaotic shootout. 2 Panthers were killed, including Hampton. The truth emerged slowly. Forensic evidence showed police fired between 90 and 99 shots. The Panthers fired at most 1, possibly 0. Hampton was shot twice in the head at close range while lying in bed, likely drugged by an FBI informant who had given him secobarbital that night. FBI documents later revealed COINTELPRO had specifically targeted Hampton as a messiah figure who needed to be neutralized. The floor plan of his apartment was provided to police by an FBI informant. This was not a shootout. It was an assassination coordinated between the FBI and local police, covered up with lies about Panther aggression that physical evidence completely contradicted. 31. On October 25, 1983, the United States invaded Grenada, a tiny Caribbean island nation with a population of about 90,000. President Reagan justified the military action by claiming it was necessary to rescue American medical students whose lives were in danger following a recent coup. It made for great television. Young Americans saved from communist thugs. Charles Modica, Chancellor of St. George's University Medical School, publicly stated the students were never in danger. The new Grenadian government had offered to guarantee their safety and facilitate evacuation. The students themselves gave mixed accounts, but none described imminent threat before the invasion. The real motive appeared to be preventing a Cuban-aligned government from consolidating power. The rescue narrative was a convenient emotional hook. Send in troops to save students, and the public supports it. Admit you are overthrowing a government you dislike, and it becomes controversial. The endangered students were a marketing strategy. 32. For 18 years, the American public was told that progress was being made in Afghanistan. Generals testified before Congress with optimistic assessments. Press conferences featured metrics showing territory secured, enemy killed, Afghan forces trained. The message was consistent. We are winning slowly. Strategy is working. Just need more time. In 2019, The Washington Post published the Afghanistan Papers, internal government documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests. The interviews were devastating. Senior officials admitted they had no idea what they were doing. We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan, one three-star general confessed. The metrics were meaningless or fabricated. Afghan army numbers were inflated with ghost soldiers. Billions in aid disappeared into corruption. Officials knew the war was unwinnable, but kept the optimistic narrative going publicly. For nearly 2 decades, Americans died in a war their own leaders knew was failing. The lying was not occasional. It was institutional, continuous, and deliberate. 33. Within days of the September 11th attacks, rescue workers and residents of Lower Manhattan needed to know one critical thing. Was the air safe to breathe? On September 18th, EPA Administrator Christine Whitman held a press conference and declared the air quality safe. She encouraged residents to return and workers to continue rescue operations without respiratory protection. This was a lie, and internal documents show the White House pressured the EPA to make reassuring statements to reopen Wall Street quickly. The actual air was toxic soup: asbestos, lead, mercury, benzene, and pulverized concrete at levels far exceeding safety standards. First responders worked the pile for months with inadequate protection because they were told the air was fine. Today, more people have died from 9/11-related illnesses than died in the attacks themselves. Thousands of firefighters, police officers, and cleanup workers developed cancers and respiratory diseases. They were poisoned by their own government's reassurances. So there you go. 33 times the United States government looked its own citizens in the eye and lied. Some lies started wars. Some killed thousands slowly. Some just stole money or manipulated what you were allowed to think. The uncomfortable truth is that governments lie. Not sometimes. Regularly. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Now here is what I want to know from you. Which of these lies shocked you the most? And more importantly, which government lie do you think is still being told right now that we will only find out about in 30 years? Drop your theories in the comments. Hit subscribe so you do not miss when we expose more historical insanity. And smash that like button if you think transparency should not be this hard to find.